Every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, a man named pushed his cleaning cart through the long hallways of Riverside Community Center. He had been doing this for 27 years. Same floors, same walls, same routine. He knew every crack in the tiles, every stain that would never come out, every corner where dust liked to hide. Was 54 years old. His hair had turned gray a long time ago. His back hurt most days. His hands were rough from years of work. To most people who passed by him, he was just the cleaning guy. Someone who existed in the background. Someone you walked past without really seeing. And that was fine with him. At least, that is what he told himself. The community center was always busy. Kids came for basketball practice. Old folks gathered for bingo nights. Young mothers brought their toddlers to play groups. There were dance classes, art workshops, and meetings of all kinds. Hundreds of people moved through those doors every single day and cleaned up after all of them. He never complained. He just did his job quietly and went home. But here is the thing about that nobody knew. Not his boss, not a single person in that building. Could sing. Not just a little bit. Not just humming in the shower kind of singing. Had a voice that could make you stop breathing for a second. A voice that came from somewhere deep inside his chest and filled up whatever room he was in. A voice that carried pain and hope and something you could not quite name but could definitely feel. He discovered this gift when he was just a boy. His father used to play old records on Sunday mornings. Soul music, gospel, the kind of songs that tell stories and break your heart and put it back together all at once. Little would stand on the living room rug and sing along, and his mother would stop whatever she was doing just to listen. "Boy, you got something special," his father used to say. "God gave you that voice for a reason." For a while, believed him. He sang in the church choir all through his teenage years. People talked about him. They said he was going places. A talent scout even came to one of his performances once and gave him a business card. Kept that card in his wallet for years, waiting for the right moment. But the right moment never came. Life has a way of changing your plans. His father got sick when was 19. Somebody had to work to help pay the bills. So put his dreams in a box, got a job, and did what needed to be done. His father passed away 2 years later. Then his mother followed not long after, like her heart just gave up without her husband beside her. Was alone at 23. No family, no money, no direction. He took the first steady job he could find, which happened to be at Riverside Community Center. He told himself it was temporary, just until he figured things out. 27 years later, he was still there. He had tried to sing a few times over the years. Once, he almost auditioned for a local talent competition. He even filled out the application form. But when it came time to submit it, something stopped him. Fear, maybe, or shame. He was not sure which. What would people think? A middle-aged janitor dreaming of being a singer. It sounded foolish even in his own head. So he threw the form away and went back to mopping floors. But he never stopped singing completely. Every night, alone in his small apartment, would put on his father's old records and let his voice fill the empty rooms. He sang to the walls. He sang to the photographs on his shelf. He sang to the memory of his parents, hoping somehow they could hear him wherever they were. It was his secret. His only escape from a life that had become smaller than he ever imagined it would be. One afternoon in early September, everything changed. Was emptying trash cans near the main office when he heard people talking about the annual community talent show. It was a big deal at the center. Every year, local people performed on stage in front of a packed audience. There were singers, dancers, comedians, and all kinds of acts. The winner got a $10,000 prize, but more importantly, they got a moment in the spotlight, a chance to be seen. Had watched the talent show from the back of the auditorium for years. He always stayed quiet, hidden in the shadows, clapping politely with everyone else. But deep down, there was always a small voice inside him whispering something he tried to ignore. That could be you up there. He shook off the thought like he always did and kept working. Later that day, a woman named who worked at the front desk stopped him in the hallway. Was one of the few people who actually talked to like he was a real person. She always asked how he was doing and remembered his birthday every year. "Hey, did you hear about the talent show?" she asked. "You should sign up." Almost laughed. "Me, I do not think so." "Why not? I have heard you humming when you work. You have got a nice voice." Felt his face get warm. He had no idea anyone had ever noticed. "That is just humming," he said. "It is nothing." Looked at him for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, like she could see right through him. "You know what I think," she said. "I think you are hiding something, and I think it is time you stopped." She walked away before he could respond. That night could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it said, hiding something. Was that what he had been doing all these years? Hiding from the world, hiding from himself. He got up and walked to the closet. In the back, behind old coats and boxes of junk, there was a plastic bag. He pulled it out and opened it carefully. Inside was his father's old suit. Dark blue, a little worn but still in good shape. Had kept it all these years, even though he had no reason to wear it. He held the suit up and looked at it for a long time. His father's words echoed in his mind. God gave you that voice for a reason. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe 54 was not too old to try. Maybe the worst thing in the world was not failing. Maybe the worst thing was never trying at all. The next morning, walked into the community center with a strange feeling in his chest. His heart was beating faster than usual. His hands were shaking a little. He walked past the front desk, past the bulletin board, past all the people who never looked at him. And then he stopped. There was a sign-up sheet on the wall. Names were already filling the lines. Young people, confident people, people with nothing to lose. Stood there for almost 5 minutes, just staring at that piece of paper. Finally, he picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he wrote his name in slow, careful letters. He stepped back and looked at what he had done. There was no going back now. For the first time in 30 years, had made a choice. He had no idea if he was ready. He had no idea what would happen, but he knew one thing for certain. He was tired of being invisible. It did not take long for the news to spread. By the next afternoon, it seemed like everyone at Riverside Community Center knew that the janitor had signed up for the talent show, and nobody could believe it. At first, it was just whispers, little comments here and there, people glancing at him when they thought he was not looking. But soon, the whispers turned into something louder, something harder to ignore. Was mopping the hallway near the gymnasium when he heard 2 young staff members talking around the corner. They did not know he was there. "Did you see the sign-up sheet? The cleaning guy actually put his name down." "You are kidding. What is he going to do, sing while he mops?" They both laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh that cuts right through you, even when it is not meant for your ears. Stood very still, his mop frozen in his hands. His face felt hot. His chest felt tight. He waited until they walked away before he started moving again. That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, noticed the looks, the smirks, the little jokes that people made just loud enough for him to hear. Some of them were not even trying to hide it anymore. "Hey, you going to sing us a song while you take out the trash?" Maybe he will mop the stage as his talent. "I heard he thinks he is the next big thing. Can you imagine?" Every comment felt like a small punch to the stomach. Kept his head down and kept working, but inside something was breaking. He had spent so many years being invisible. Now he was visible for all the wrong reasons. People were not seeing him. They were laughing at him. Even some of the older staff members, people had known for years, seemed uncomfortable. One woman who had always been friendly to him pulled him aside one morning. "Honey, are you sure about this talent show thing?" she asked. Her voice was soft, like she was talking to a child. "I just do not want you to get hurt. You know how these things go. People can be cruel." She meant well, knew that, but her words did not make him feel better. They made him feel worse, like she had already decided he was going to fail. The worst part was the doubt that started growing inside his own head. "Who do you think you are?" The voice whispered at night when he could not sleep. "You are 54 years old. You clean floors for a living. You have not performed in front of anyone in 30 years. What makes you think you can do this?" Lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, running through all the reasons he should just scratch his name off that list. It would be so easy. He could walk into the center tomorrow morning, find that piece of paper and erase himself from it. Nobody would be surprised. In fact, people would probably be relieved. They could stop feeling awkward around him. Everything could go back to normal. But then he thought about what normal meant. Normal meant waking up alone, going to work, mopping floors, going home, eating dinner by himself in front of the television, going to sleep, and then doing it all over again the next day. Normal meant being invisible. Normal meant dying with his voice still trapped inside him. "Is that really what you want?" Another voice asked, the quieter one, the one that sounded a little bit like his father. Got out of bed and walked to the living room. He pulled out one of his father's old records and put it on the player. The music filled the room, warm and familiar. A song about struggle and hope and holding on when everything feels impossible. Closed his eyes and started to sing. His voice cracked at first. It always did when he had not sung in a while, but then it found its footing. The notes came easier. The sound grew stronger, and for a few minutes forgot about the whispers and the laughter and the doubt. He was not a janitor. He was not a joke. He was just a man with a song in his heart, doing the only thing that had ever made him feel truly alive. When the song ended, stood in the silence for a long time. He thought about his mother and father. He thought about the dreams he had buried so many years ago. He thought about all the people who had ever looked past him like he was not even there. And then he thought about that stage. What if he walked out there and failed? What if he forgot the words? What if his voice broke and everyone laughed? It would be humiliating. He would never be able to show his face at the community center again. But what if he did not fail? What if, just once in his life, he showed the world who he really was? Made a decision that night. He was not going to scratch his name off the list. He was going to practice every single day until the talent show. He was going to give everything he had, and whatever happened, at least he would know that he tried. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of his life. Practiced every night after work. He sang until his throat hurt. He worked on his breathing, his timing, his control. He listened to recordings of his favorite singers and studied how they held their notes, how they moved through a song, how they made people feel something with just their voice. During the day, he kept his head down and did his job. The jokes continued, the looks continued, but stopped letting them in. He built a wall around himself, brick by brick, and focused on only one thing. The song. He had chosen a song that meant everything to him. It was an old soul song, one his father used to play on Sunday mornings. A song about change and pain and believing that better days were coming, even when the world gave you no reason to believe. Had heard that song 1,000 times, but now, for the first time, he was going to make it his own. 3 days before the show, found him in the hallway. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Shrugged, "I am still here." Smiled, "That is more than most people could say. You know, a lot of folks would have given up by now." "I thought about it," admitted, "more than once." "But you did not." "No, I did not." Looked at him for a moment. There was something like respect in her eyes. "I do not know what is going to happen on that stage, but I want you to know something. I am proud of you for trying. That takes more courage than most people have in their whole lives." Did not know what to say. Nobody had said anything like that to him in a very long time. He just nodded and thanked her quietly. That night took his father's suit out of the closet again. He tried it on for the first time in years. It still fit. A little tight in the shoulders, but it still fit. He looked at himself in the mirror. An old man in an old suit, with gray hair and tired eyes and hands that had spent decades pushing a mop. But there was something else in that reflection too, something he had not seen in a long time. Hoping. The talent show was in 3 days. 3 days until would walk onto that stage and stand in front of 300 people who expected nothing from him. 3 days until he would open his mouth and show them the voice he had been hiding for 30 years. He did not know if he was ready. He did not know if he would ever be ready. But he knew one thing for certain. He was done hiding. He was done being invisible. He was done letting fear make his decisions for him. Whatever happened next was going to face it standing up. The morning of the talent show woke up before his alarm. He had barely slept. His mind had been racing all night, running through the lyrics over and over again, imagining everything that could go wrong. He lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. His stomach felt like it was full of stones. His hands were already shaking, and he had not even gotten up yet. This is it, he thought. No more waiting, no more practicing. Tonight you either do this or you do not. He forced himself out of bed and went through his morning routine. Shower, coffee, toast that he could barely eat. Every small action felt heavier than usual, like he was moving through water. Looked at the clock. The show was not until 7 in the evening. That meant he had almost 12 hours to sit with his fear, 12 hours to talk himself out of it, 12 hours to imagine 300 faces staring at him, waiting for him to fail. He needed to stay busy. So he cleaned. He cleaned his apartment from top to bottom, even though it was already clean. He scrubbed the kitchen. He organized his closet. He dusted shelves that did not need dusting. Anything to keep his hands moving and his mind from spinning out of control. Around noon, he sat down and played the song one more time, just to make sure he still remembered it. His voice came out thin and shaky. He stopped halfway through and put his head in his hands. What are you doing? The doubt crept back in. You are going to walk out there and make a fool of yourself. Everyone is going to laugh, you know they will. Sat in silence for a long time. Then he got up, walked to the shelf and picked up an old photograph. It was a picture of his father, taken many years ago. His father was young in the photo, smiling wide, standing in front of their old church. Touched the glass gently. I do not know if I can do this, he whispered, but I am going to try for you, for Mom, for me. He set the photograph down and went to get ready. At 5 o'clock, put on his father's suit. He stood in front of the mirror and adjusted the tie 3 times before he got it right. The suit still fit well enough. It smelled faintly of cedar from the closet, but underneath that could almost smell his father. That mix of aftershave and pipe tobacco that he remembered from childhood. He looked at himself for a long moment. He did not look like a star. He did not look like someone who belonged on a stage. He looked like exactly what he was. An old janitor in an old suit, about to do something crazy. But he also looked like a man who had made up his mind. Grabbed his keys and walked out the door. The community center was buzzing when he arrived. People were everywhere. Families coming in with lawn chairs and blankets. Kids running around with excitement. Volunteers setting up tables and hanging decorations. The parking lot was almost full. Parked in his usual spot, the one he used every day for work. He sat in his car for a few minutes, watching people walk toward the building. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Just breathe, he told himself. One step at a time, just get inside. He got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. A few people glanced at him. One teenager did a double take, probably surprised to see the janitor dressed up in a suit, kept his eyes forward and kept walking. Inside, the auditorium was already filling up. Rows of chairs stretched from the front of the stage all the way to the back wall. There had to be at least 300 seats, and most of them were already taken. Had never seen the room so packed. He made his way backstage where all the performers were gathering. It was chaos back there, dancers stretching in corners, a group of teenagers practicing a comedy routine, a young woman tuning a guitar. Everyone looked nervous, but they also looked like they belonged, like they had done this before, like they knew what they were doing. Found a quiet corner and stood by himself. Nobody talked to him. A few people looked his way with curious expressions, but nobody approached. He was used to that. The show started at 7 sharp. Watched from the side of the stage as act after act went on. A little girl did a tap dance routine and got a huge round of applause. A man in his 30s told jokes that made the whole room laugh. A teenage boy played the piano beautifully, his fingers flying across the keys. 2 sisters sang a duet that brought tears to some eyes in the audience. Every performer was good, really good, and every time the crowd clapped and cheered, felt his confidence shrink a little more. These people have talent, he thought, real talent. What do you have? A dream that is 30 years too late. The minutes crawled by, each one felt like an hour. Palms were sweating, his mouth was dry. He kept wiping his hands on his pants, but it did not help. Then he heard the host's voice echo through the speakers. And now, ladies, and please welcome to the stage. His legs went numb. For a moment he could not move. He just stood there, frozen, as the sound of his own name hung in the air. Someone backstage gave him a little push. That is you, go on. Took a step, then another. His feet felt like they were made of lead. The curtain parted and suddenly he was walking out onto the stage, into the blinding white light. The applause was polite, scattered. He could hear whispers rippling through the crowd. Is that the janitor? What is he doing up there? This should be interesting. Walked to the center of the stage and stood in front of the microphone. The spotlight was hot on his face. He could not see individual faces in the audience, just a sea of dark shapes stretching back into the shadows. But he could feel them. Hundreds of eyes all locked on him, waiting, judging. His throat tightened. His hands trembled at his sides. For one terrible second he forgot why he was there. He forgot the words. He forgot everything. The backing track started to play. Soft piano notes filled the auditorium. The music was beautiful, but barely heard it. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears and the voice in his head screaming at him to run. You do not belong here. You never did. Just walk off the stage. Nobody will blame you. They already expect you to fail. Closed his eyes. And in that darkness he saw his father's face, smiling, proud, believing in him the way no one else ever had. He saw his mother, standing in the kitchen doorway, listening to him sing as a boy. He saw himself at 19, full of dreams, holding that business card from the talent scout. The card he never used, the chance he never took. He saw all the years that had passed, all the silence, all the hiding, all the songs that never left his small apartment. And he made a choice. Not for the crowd, not for the judges, not even for himself. For everyone who ever had a dream and was too scared to chase it. For everyone who had ever been told they were not good enough. For everyone who had ever felt invisible. Opened his mouth. And he began to sing. The first note that came out of his mouth changed everything. It was low and soft at first, almost a whisper, but there was something in it, something that made people stop shifting in their seats, something that made the whispers die down, something that grabbed the room by the throat and refused to let go. Kept his eyes closed. He was not on that stage anymore. He was somewhere else entirely. He was back in his childhood living room, standing on that old rug, singing along to his father's records while his mother smiled from the doorway. The second line came stronger. His voice opened up like a flower in the morning sun. It filled the auditorium, reaching into every corner, every shadow, every heart in the room. The sound was rich and deep, full of years of pain and longing and love that had never found a place to go. People in the audience started to sit up. A woman in the third row put her hand over her mouth. A man near the back leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. The teenagers who had been whispering and giggling just moments ago went completely silent. Nobody was laughing now. Moved into the chorus and his voice soared. It climbed higher and higher, carrying all the weight of 30 years of silence. Every note was perfect. Every word meant something. This was not just a song. This was a confession, a prayer, a release of everything he had been holding inside for so long. The song was about change, about struggle, about believing that better days were coming even when the world gave you every reason to give up. Had heard this song 1,000 times growing up, but tonight it was not just a song anymore. It was his story, his life, his truth. And everyone in that room could feel it. A woman in the middle section started to cry. She did not even try to hide it. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she watched this man, this janitor, pour his soul out on that stage. Her husband reached over and took her hand, and she squeezed it tight. Near the front, one of the judges sat frozen with her pen still in her hand. She had been taking notes all night, scoring each performer carefully. But now her notepad was forgotten. She could not look away from the man at the microphone. In 20 years of judging talent shows, she had never seen anything like this. Did not see any of it. His eyes were still closed. He was lost in the music, lost in the memories, lost in the feeling of finally letting go. For the first time in decades, he was not hiding. He was not pretending to be smaller than he was. He was standing in his full truth, letting the world see exactly who he was and what he carried inside. The bridge of the song came and his voice dropped low again. Soft, intimate, like he was sharing a secret with every person in the room. The auditorium was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. 300 people holding their breath, afraid to make a sound, afraid to break the spell. Then the final chorus began. Opened his eyes for the first time since he started singing. He looked out at the audience, at all those faces staring back at him, and something passed between them. A connection, an understanding. In that moment, he was not a janitor. He was not a nobody. He was a man who had fought his whole life to get to this stage, and he was not going to waste a single second of it. His voice rose higher than it had all night. It was powerful and raw and full of fire. The notes seemed to shake the walls. People grabbed onto their armrests like they were on a roller coaster, like they were being lifted out of their seats by the sheer force of his voice. A young boy in the audience tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mommy," he whispered, "is he an angel?" His mother did not answer. She could not. She was crying too hard. Backstage, the other performers had stopped what they were doing. They crowded around the curtain, peeking out at the stage, watching in stunned silence. The teenage comedy group, the tap dancer, the piano player, all of them stood there with their mouths open, unable to believe what they were witnessing. "Where did that come from?" one of them whispered. Nobody had an answer. On stage was reaching the end of the song, the final lines, the last chance to say everything he had been holding back for 30 years. He thought about his father, who had always believed in him. He thought about his mother, who had loved his voice before anyone else. He thought about all the nights he had spent singing alone in his apartment, wondering if anyone would ever hear him. Well, they were hearing him now. The last note came from somewhere deep inside his chest, somewhere he did not even know existed. It was long and pure and heartbreaking and beautiful all at once. Held it for what felt like forever, letting it hang in the air like a bird that did not want to land. And then it was over. The music faded. The last echo of his voice drifted up to the ceiling and disappeared. He stood at the microphone, breathing hard, his whole body trembling. For one terrible second there was nothing, complete silence. Heart stopped. He thought he had failed. He thought they hated it. He thought he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Then he heard it. A single person started clapping, then another, and then, like a wave crashing onto shore, the entire auditorium erupted. The sound was deafening. 300 people were on their feet, clapping and cheering and screaming. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were doing both at the same time. The noise was so loud that could feel it vibrating in his chest. He stood there, unable to move, unable to think, unable to process what was happening. People were chanting his name, the name that nobody had ever cared about before, the name that had been written on so many paychecks and work schedules but never on anyone's lips like this. The judges were standing too, all three of them on their feet, applauding like everyone else. One of them was wiping tears from her eyes. Another was shaking his head slowly, like he still could not believe what he had just witnessed. In the wings of the stage, stood watching. She had snuck in to see his performance, and now she was crying harder than anyone, crying for the man who had been invisible for so long, crying for the voice that had been trapped in silence, crying because she had known there was something special hiding inside him. Finally found the strength to move. He took a small bow, his hands shaking, his legs barely holding him up. The crowd roared even louder. People were taking out their phones, recording everything, trying to capture a moment that none of them would ever forget. As he walked off the stage, felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt seen. Not as the janitor, not as the cleaning guy, not as the man who mopped floors and emptied trash cans, but as himself, as the boy who had once dreamed of singing and the man who had finally found the courage to try. Backstage, the other performers surrounded him. They shook his hand. They hugged him. They told him he was incredible. A teenage girl who had performed earlier was crying as she hugged him. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard," she said. Did not know how to respond. He had spent so many years being overlooked, being dismissed, being treated like he did not matter. And now these strangers were looking at him like he was something special. Maybe he was. Maybe he always had been. He just needed the courage to show it. Did not sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment over and over again in his mind. The bright lights, the silence before the first note, the roar of the crowd, the feeling of 300 strangers looking at him like he mattered. It still did not feel real. When the judges had announced the winner, almost did not hear his own name. He stood backstage in a daze while people pushed him forward, back onto that stage where everything had changed. The host handed him an envelope with the prize money inside, $10,000, more money than had ever held in his hands at one time. But the money was not what made him cry. It was the way people looked at him, the way they cheered, the way complete strangers came up to him after the show and hugged him like they had known him their whole lives. An old woman grabbed his hands and told him that his song had reminded her of her late husband. A young father said his kids had not stopped talking about the singing janitor. A teenage girl asked for his autograph. His autograph, like he was somebody famous. Had walked to his car that night in a fog. He sat behind the wheel for almost 20 minutes before he could bring himself to drive home. His hands were still shaking. His heart was still pounding. And somewhere deep inside, a part of him was waiting to wake up and realize it had all been a dream. But it was not a dream. The next morning's phone started buzzing. He did not recognize most of the numbers. At first, he ignored them, then called and told him to check the internet. "You are everywhere," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Someone posted a video of your performance last night. It is blowing up." Did not really understand what that meant. He was not good with computers or social media or any of that stuff. But he found his way to the website told him about, and there it was. A video of him singing on that stage. The view count was already in the tens of thousands and climbing fast. He watched himself on the small screen of his phone. He barely recognized the man up there. That man looked confident, powerful, alive. Was that really him? By the end of the day, the video had over 100,000 views. By the end of the week, it had crossed 2 million. News stations started calling. A reporter from the local television channel showed up at the community center wanting to interview him. A radio host invited him on his morning show. Did not know how to handle any of it. He had spent 54 years being invisible, and now suddenly the whole world wanted to know his story. The interview requests kept coming. People wanted to know everything. Where did he learn to sing? Why had he been hiding his talent for so long? What was he going to do next? Answered as honestly as he could. He told them about his father's records, about his mother's smile, about the dreams he had buried when life got hard, about the 27 years of mopping floors and feeling like nobody. People loved his story. They shared it with their friends. They wrote comments saying he had inspired them to chase their own dreams. They called him a hero, which made uncomfortable. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had finally gotten tired of being afraid. 2 weeks after the talent show, received an email that changed everything. A music producer had seen the viral video. He wanted to meet with. He wanted to talk about recording an album. Read the email 5 times before he believed it was real. Then he sat down on his couch and cried like a baby. The meeting happened a few days later in a fancy office downtown. Wore his father's suit again. It was the only nice thing he owned. The producer was a young man, much younger than expected. He had tattoos on his arms and a warm smile that made feel a little less nervous. "I have been in this business for 15 years, the producer said. "I have heard a lot of voices, but yours stopped me in my tracks. There is something real in the way you sing, something you cannot teach, something you cannot fake." Did not know what to say, so he just nodded. "I want to record an album with you," the producer continued. "Real songs, your story, your voice. I think people need to hear it." For a moment could not speak. His whole life he had dreamed of something like this. And now, at 54 years old, it was actually happening. "I am just a janitor," he finally said. "I do not know anything about the music business." The producer smiled. "You let me worry about the business. You just do what you did on that stage. Sing from your heart. That is all anyone needs." Over the next few months, his life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. He recorded his album in a real studio with real musicians. He did interviews on television. He performed at concerts where thousands of people bought tickets just to hear him sing. The same voice that had echoed off the walls of his tiny apartment was now reaching people all over the world. But never forgot where he came from. He went back to Riverside Community Center one afternoon, a few months after his life had changed. He walked through those familiar hallways, past the gymnasium, past the offices, past all the places he had cleaned for nearly 3 decades. Some of the staff members stopped to stare. A few of them looked embarrassed, probably remembering the jokes they had made. Did not hold it against them. He just smiled and kept walking. He found his old cleaning cart sitting in the storage closet. Someone else was using it now. A young man who had taken over his job stood there for a moment, looking at the mop and the bucket and the yellow caution signs, all the tools of a life he had left behind. He did not miss the work, but he was grateful for it. Those 27 years had taught him patience. They had taught him humility. They had taught him that your job does not define who you are. Your heart does. Before he left, stopped by the front desk to see. She jumped up from her chair and hugged him tight. "Look at you," she said, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you had something special." "You were the only one," said. Shook her head. "No, you knew too, you just forgot for a while." Thought about that for a long time after he left. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had always known. Maybe the voice inside him had been waiting all those years, patient and quiet, until he was finally ready to let it out. He was 54 years old when he sang on that stage for the first time. Some people said that was too old to start over, too old to chase a dream, too old to change your life. Proved them all wrong. Because it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. It is never too late to step out of the shadows and let the world see you. It is never too late to open your mouth and sing the song that has been living inside you all along. His father had told him something when he was just a boy, something he had carried with him through all the hard years and all the silent nights. God gave you that voice for a reason. It took 54 years to understand what that reason was. Not fame, not money, not applause. The reason was to remind people that dreams do not have an expiration date, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that no matter how invisible you feel, there is something inside you worth sharing with the world. All you have to do is find the courage to share it. And when you finally do, the world just might give you a standing ovation.